The morning I looked out my kitchen window and saw Patricia Harrington standing in my backyard with a clipboard was the morning I knew my life in Riverside Meadows was about to become a living nightmare. I had just moved to this subdivision in Mesa, Arizona, 6 months ago with my wife Emma and our 2 kids, Jake and Lily. The house was perfect, the neighborhood seemed quiet, and the backyard was spacious enough for the 15-foot trampoline I had installed last month. My kids loved that thing. Every afternoon after school, they would be out there jumping, laughing, and burning off energy instead of being glued to their tablets. But apparently, Patricia had other plans. I walked outside in my bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, trying to process what I was seeing. Patricia was in her late 40s, with that severe bob haircut that somehow always looked freshly blown out, wearing a crisp white pantsuit despite the Arizona heat already climbing toward 90 degrees at 8 in the morning. "Can I help you?" I called out, stepping onto my patio. She turned around with that tight smile that did not reach her eyes. "Warren Davis, good morning. I am conducting an inspection of your property on behalf of the Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association." An inspection? I did not request any inspection. Patricia tapped her pen against her clipboard. "According to Section 7.3 of the HOA bylaws, which you signed when you purchased this property, the board reserves the right to conduct visual inspections of any outdoor installations that may pose a safety hazard or violate community standards." I took a sip of my coffee, trying to keep my cool. "And what exactly is the problem? This trampoline?" She gestured dramatically at it like it was a nuclear reactor instead of a piece of playground equipment. "It is a severe safety hazard and violates multiple HOA regulations." "What regulations?" I checked the bylaws before I bought it. There was nothing about trampolines. Patricia flipped through papers on her clipboard with practiced efficiency. "Section 12.8. No recreational equipment exceeding 10 feet in diameter may be installed without prior board approval." Section 15.2. No structures or equipment that could reasonably be considered an attractive nuisance. Section 18.1. All outdoor installations must maintain the aesthetic integrity of the neighborhood. I stared at her. "It is a trampoline. Kids have trampolines." "Not in Riverside Meadows, they do not." She made a note on her clipboard. "You have 14 days to remove it, or you will face daily fines of $50 until compliance is achieved." "You have got to be kidding me." "I assure you, Mr. Davis, the HOA board takes these matters very seriously. We have a responsibility to all residents to maintain property values and ensure safety standards." She handed me a formal notice, already printed and ready to go. "Have a pleasant day." I watched her walk back around my house toward the front, her heels somehow not sinking into the grass. Emma came outside, tying her robe closed. "What was that about?" "The HOA wants us to get rid of the trampoline." "What? Why?" I handed her the notice. She read through it, her expression shifting from confusion to anger. "This is ridiculous. We spent $800 on that thing." "I know. The kids love it, I know. We are not getting rid of it." I looked at my wife, then back at the trampoline. "No, we are not." The next 2 weeks were relatively quiet. I half expected Patricia to show up every day with new complaints, but she seemed content to let her 14-day ultimatum run its course. The kids kept using the trampoline, and I started documenting everything. I took photos of the installation, made sure the safety net was always secure, and even printed out statistics about trampoline safety when properly maintained. On day 15, I found another notice on my front door. This one informed me that I was now being fined $50 per day, and that amount would be added to my quarterly HOA dues. There was also a new complaint. The trampoline was creating excessive noise during what they called quiet hours. I had not even known there were quiet hours. That evening, I was in the garage organizing tools when I heard voices from the backyard. Kid voices. I walked around the side of the house and stopped dead in my tracks. There were 4 children on my trampoline. None of them were mine. Jake and Lily were at a birthday party across town with Emma. I recognized the kids, though. 2 of them were Patricia's children, Brendan and Sophie. The other 2 belonged to Karen Mitchell, another HOA board member who lived 3 houses down. I stood there for a moment, watching them jump and laugh, completely unsupervised in my yard. Then I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Hey kids," I called out after getting about 2 minutes of footage. They all froze like deer in headlights. "Does your mom know you are here?" I asked, looking directly at Brendan. He was about 10, same age as Jake. She said we could play in the neighborhood." "Did she specifically say you could use my trampoline?" The kids exchanged glances. Sophie, who could not have been more than 7, said, "She said it was okay." "Interesting. Well, I am going to need you all to head home now, please, and use the gate. Do not try to climb the fence." They scrambled off the trampoline and filed out through my back gate. I followed them to make sure they actually left. Then I checked my security camera system. I had installed cameras a few weeks ago, mainly for package theft protection, but I had one aimed at the backyard. I spent the next hour going through footage. What I found made my blood boil. Over the past week, Patricia's kids had been using my trampoline almost every single day, usually in the afternoon while I was at work. Karen's kids showed up frequently too. On 3 separate occasions, Patricia herself was visible in the background of the footage, standing in my yard watching her children jump, sometimes talking on her phone, sometimes just supervising. The woman who had threatened me with fines and claimed my trampoline was a dangerous hazard, was letting her own children use it daily. I made copies of everything and sent them to a lawyer friend of mine, Marcus, who did not specialize in HOA law but knew enough to point me in the right direction. His response came within an hour. "This is gold. Document everything. Do not confront them yet. Let me make some calls." The following Monday, I received a certified letter from the HOA attorney's office. The fines were now being escalated to $100 per day, and they were threatening to place a lien on my property if I did not remove the trampoline within 7 days. The letter also mentioned that I was creating a hostile environment by restricting neighborhood children from playing in my yard. That last part almost made me laugh. They were actually putting in writing that I was being hostile by not letting random kids trespass on my property to use equipment that they had deemed dangerous. Marcus called me that evening. "Okay, I talked to a colleague who handles HOA disputes. This is actually more common than you would think. You have got a few options here. I am listening. First, you could just take down the trampoline, maybe sell it, cut your losses. That is the easy route, but it means they win." Not happening, I figured. Second option, you can fight this. With the video evidence you have showing board members allowing their children to use the very equipment they are fining you for, you have got a strong case for selective enforcement and possibly harassment. What does that mean practically? It means you can file a complaint with the state. Arizona has laws protecting homeowners from unreasonable HOA rules and selective enforcement. You can also countersue for the fines and legal fees if you win. But Warren, I have got to be honest with you. These things can drag out for months, sometimes years. It is stressful and expensive. What is the third option? Expose them. You have video evidence. Most HOAs hate public scrutiny. Send a formal complaint to the entire board, attach the videos, and make it clear you know exactly what they are doing. Sometimes that is enough to make them back off. I thought about it. What if I do both? File the formal complaint and start the legal process. That is probably your best bet. I will have my colleague draw up the paperwork. In the meantime, change your gate code if you have one and post clear no trespassing signs. You want to make it crystal clear that any entry onto your property is not authorized. I spent Tuesday morning installing new locks on both gates and putting up professionally printed signs that read, "Private property. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted." I also added signs specifically on the trampoline. Authorized users only. All activity recorded. That afternoon, I got an angry call from Patricia. "Mr. Davis, this is harassment." "What is harassment, Patricia?" "These signs. You are creating a hostile environment for children in this neighborhood." I actually laughed. "You mean the children who have been trespassing on my property to use a trampoline you claim is dangerous?" Silence on the other end. "I have video footage, Patricia. Hours of it. Your kids, Karen's kids, all using my supposedly hazardous equipment while you watched and did nothing." "I do not know what you are talking about." "Really?" "Because I've got footage from last Thursday at 3:15 p.m. where you are standing in my backyard, watching Brendan and Sophie jump on the trampoline. You are wearing a blue dress and talking on your phone. Want me to send you a screenshot?" More silence. "Here is what is going to happen," I continued. "I am filing a formal complaint with the HOA board and the state about selective enforcement. I am also going to contest every single fine you have levied against me. And if you continue this harassment, I will file a lawsuit for damages and emotional distress." "You cannot." "Actually, I can. My lawyer is already drawing up paperwork. I suggest you talk to the rest of the board and reconsider this situation." She hung up. 2 hours later, my doorbell rang. It was not just Patricia this time. She had brought Karen Mitchell and Richard Torres, the HOA board president. Richard was a heavy-set man in his 60s who owned a car dealership in Phoenix and always wore polo shirts with his company logo. "Warren, can we talk?" Richard asked, his tone conciliatory. I invited them into my living room. Emma came in from the kitchen, arms crossed, standing beside me in solidarity. Richard cleared his throat. "We may have been a bit hasty with the trampoline situation." "A bit hasty," Emma said. "You threatened to put a lien on our house." "Now, let us not get dramatic," Karen interjected. She was in her early 50s with an overly processed blonde hair and too much perfume. "We are simply trying to maintain community standards." "By letting your kids use our equipment while fining us for having it?" I asked. Patricia shifted uncomfortably. "The children were simply playing in the neighborhood. I did not specifically authorize them to use your trampoline." I pulled out my phone and played the video from last Thursday. There she was, clear as day, watching her kids jump while standing in my backyard. "That does not look like unsupervised trespassing to me," Emma said. Richard held up his hands. "Okay, look, maybe we can reach a compromise here." "I am listening," I said, though I already knew I was not compromising on anything. "What if we grandfather in your trampoline? You can keep it, but we update the bylaws so no other trampolines can be installed in the future. And the fines, we will waive them." "Not good enough," I said. "You do not get to threaten my family, harass us for weeks, and then just say never mind when you get caught breaking your own rules." "What do you want?" Patricia asked, her voice tight. "First, a formal written apology from the board. Second, all fines dropped and removed from our record. Third, a review of the entire bylaws by an independent attorney to identify any other unreasonable restrictions. Fourth, Patricia resigns from the board." That is outrageous. Patricia stood up. I am not resigning. Then I guess we will see you in court. And when the local news picks up a story about HOA board members using a homeowner's equipment while fining them for having it, we will see how that plays out for your reputation. Emma pulled up the contact page for ABC 15 News in Phoenix on her phone. I bet they would love this story. Maybe they will do one of those investigative segments. Richard looked at Patricia, then at Karen, then back at me. Can you give us a minute to discuss this? Take your time. I gestured toward the front porch. You can talk out there. They filed outside. Emma and I watched through the window as they had what appeared to be a heated discussion. Patricia was gesturing wildly, Karen kept shaking her head, and Richard seemed to be playing mediator. After about 10 minutes, they came back inside. We can agree to your terms, Richard said slowly. Except for Patricia resigning. That is up to her, and we cannot force board members to step down. I looked at Patricia. She was staring at the floor, her jaw clenched. Fine, I said. But I want it in writing that the board formally acknowledges selective enforcement occurred, and that all actions taken against me regarding the trampoline were inappropriate. I also want a binding agreement that no further complaints will be filed about the trampoline or any other aspect of my property, unless there is a genuine safety hazard verified by an independent inspector. That is reasonable, Richard said. I will have our attorney draft something. Not your attorney, a neutral third party, and I want it done within 72 hours, he nodded. Agreed. After they left, Emma hugged me. I cannot believe they actually backed down. They did not have a choice. The evidence was too clear. Do you really think Patricia will stay on the board after this? I shrugged. Honestly, I do not care as long as she leaves us alone. But of course, it was not over. It never is with people like Patricia. The next morning, I found dog feces on my front porch. I did not own a dog. Neither did my immediate neighbors. The placement was too precise, too deliberate. Someone had put it there. My security camera caught a figure in dark clothing approaching the porch at 2 a.m., but the person knew where the camera was and kept their face angled away. The build looked female, medium height. Could have been Patricia, could have been Karen, could have been someone else entirely. I called the police and filed a report. The officer who responded, a young guy named Officer Mendez, seemed sympathetic but not particularly optimistic. HOA disputes. He asked while taking notes. How did you guess? We get calls from this subdivision at least twice a week, usually noise complaints or parking issues. He looked up at my camera. That footage might not be enough to identify anyone specifically. What if it escalates? Keep documenting everything. If it becomes harassment or vandalism, we can investigate further. But honestly, these things usually resolve themselves once lawyers get involved. After he left, I installed 2 more cameras with better night vision and wider angles. I also set up motion-activated lights around the entire perimeter of my property. The agreement came through on Thursday, drafted by a neutral attorney Richard's lawyer had recommended. It was detailed and explicit, acknowledging that the HOA board had inappropriately targeted my property and that all fines were being rescinded. There was also a clause stating that any future complaints had to follow a formal process with documented evidence and the opportunity for me to respond before any fines were levied. I signed it. Richard signed it. Karen signed it. Patricia's signature looked like an angry slash across the paper, but it was there. For about a week, things were quiet. Jake and Lily used the trampoline every afternoon. Emma and I started to relax. I even waved at Richard when I saw him driving through the neighborhood, and he waved back. Then on Tuesday evening, I came home from work to find my trampoline slashed. Not just a small tear. The entire safety net had been cut in multiple places, and the jumping mat had 3 large gashes through it. The damage was deliberate and extensive. The trampoline was completely unusable. Emma was standing in the backyard with her phone out, already documenting the damage. Jake and Lily were inside, and I could tell Emma had kept them from seeing this. "When did you find it?" I asked. "About 20 minutes ago. I called the police already." This time, 2 officers responded, including Officer Mendez from before. "This is vandalism," he said, photographing the damage. "Do your cameras cover this area?" "They should." I pulled up the footage on my phone, scrolling through the afternoon. At 1:45 p.m., a figure in a hoodie and sunglasses climbed over my back fence, looked directly at the camera for just a moment, then pulled out what looked like a utility knife and started cutting. The person worked fast, finishing the destruction in under 3 minutes before climbing back over the fence. "Can you make out who that is?" Officer Mendez asked. I zoomed in on the clearest frame. The person was definitely female, average build, but the hoodie and sunglasses obscured most identifying features. There was something familiar about the body language, though. "I have a suspicion," I said, "but I cannot prove it from this footage alone." "Do you have other cameras that might show where they came from?" I checked my front yard camera. At 1:40 p.m., a car had parked on the street 3 houses down. A woman got out, already wearing the hoodie and sunglasses, and walked between houses toward the back of the subdivision. The car was a white Honda CR-V. "Can you see the license plate?" Officer Mendez asked. I zoomed in. The angle was not perfect, but I could make out most of it. The officer wrote it down. "I will run this. If it comes back to anyone you have had disputes with, we will have probable cause for an investigation." He called me 4 hours later. "The car is registered to Patricia Harrington." I felt vindication and anger mixing together. "What happens now?" "We will bring her in for questioning." The video is not conclusive enough for an arrest on its own since we cannot see her face, but combined with the documented dispute between you and her, and the fact that it is her car, we have enough to investigate. I would recommend you also file a civil claim for the damages. Patricia was questioned the next day. According to Officer Mendez, she denied everything, claimed her car had been at home all day, and suggested that maybe someone else had been driving it. "Does anyone else have access to your vehicle?" the officer had asked. "Well, my husband sometimes drives it, and my teenage son has his license." They questioned her husband and son. Both confirmed they had been elsewhere at the time of the vandalism. Her husband had been at work with dozens of witnesses. Her son had been at school. But Arizona requires more than circumstantial evidence for a criminal conviction. Without a clear shot of Patricia's face or some other definitive proof, the DA did not think they could make charges stick. However, they did tell Patricia that they knew it was her, that they would be watching for any further incidents, and that if anything else happened, she would be their primary suspect. I filed a civil suit for the cost of the trampoline plus installation, camera equipment, and emotional distress. The total came to $4,000. Patricia's response came through her lawyer. She categorically denied any involvement and counter-sued me for defamation. Marcus, who had now become my regular attorney for this whole mess, just laughed when he saw the counter-suit. This is desperation. She knows we have her on camera at the time of the vandalism. The fact that she is counter-suing for defamation actually helps us because now we get to do discovery. We can subpoena her phone records, her GPS data if her car has a tracking system, everything. How long will this take? Months, probably. But Warren, here is the thing. Most of these cases settle before trial. She does not want to go under oath and have all this evidence presented. My guess is her lawyer will advise her to settle once we start the discovery process. He was right. 2 weeks into discovery, after we subpoenaed her phone records showing she had been actively using her phone during the exact time of the vandalism, and that the phone had pinged off a cell tower 3 blocks from my house, her lawyer called to negotiate. They offered to pay for a new trampoline. We counter-offered full cost of replacement plus installation, a written apology, and her resignation from the HOA board. They came back with the full replacement cost and a promise to resign from the board, but no written apology. Marcus looked at me. Your call. We can push for the apology, but that might mean going to trial. I thought about it. The apology would be satisfying, but it would not be sincere. Patricia would never genuinely apologize. And dragging this through a trial would cost more in attorney fees than any satisfaction I might get from winning. Take the deal, I said. The settlement was finalized in early July. Patricia resigned from the HOA board the following week. According to neighborhood gossip, she claimed it was due to personal reasons and work commitments, but everyone knew the real story. Word had spread fast in Riverside Meadows. I used the settlement money to buy an even better trampoline, this one with extra safety features and a warranty. The installation company did a fantastic job, and they even complimented my backyard setup. But the story did not end there, because Patricia was not the type to just fade away quietly. She might have resigned from the board, but she still lived in the neighborhood. And she still had friends on the board, particularly Karen, who had moved up to board president after Richard decided he was tired of the drama and stepped down. In August, I received a notice about a new HOA initiative, a neighborhood beautification project that would require all homes to meet updated landscaping standards. This included specific requirements for lawn height, types of plants allowed, fence styles, and outdoor equipment placement. The outdoor equipment section was clearly targeted at me. It required all recreational equipment to be placed in visually unobtrusive locations and to be earth-toned colors that blend with natural surroundings. My trampoline was bright blue and located in the center of my backyard, visible from the street through my back fence. Emmer read the notice and threw it on the table. This is ridiculous. They are still targeting us. Probably. But this time it applies to everyone, so they cannot claim selective enforcement. What are we going to do? I thought about it. Let me make some calls. I reached out to several neighbors who had outdoor equipment, pools, swing sets, and other things that might be affected by these new rules. Turned out, I was not the only one frustrated with the HOA's increasing restrictions. A guy named Tom Whitaker, who lived on the next street over, had been fighting with the board for months over his vegetable garden. They claimed it violated aesthetic standards. A woman named Jennifer Chen had received complaints about her kid's basketball hoop. Another family, the Rodriguezes, had been told their patio furniture was the wrong color. I organized a meeting at my house. 12 families showed up. Here is the thing, I explained, standing in my living room with these frustrated homeowners. The HOA board has 4 members now. There are 347 homes in this subdivision. We can vote them out. How? Jennifer asked. The bylaws require a vote for board members every 2 years. The next election is in October, 3 months away. We can run our own candidates and vote in a completely new board. Tom leaned forward. And say what? That we want no rules at all. No, that we want reasonable rules applied fairly. Most of us are not against having an HOA. We just want one that is not on a power trip. Over the next few weeks, we organized. We created a group chat, started a Facebook page called Reasonable Riverside Meadows, and began reaching out to other homeowners. The response was overwhelming. Turned out, Patricia and Karen had been making enemies for years. There were dozens of families with stories of petty complaints, selective enforcement, and harassment. Some were minor, like being fined for putting trash cans out an hour too early. Others were serious, like a retired couple who had been threatened with a lien for installing a wheelchair ramp that allegedly violated aesthetic guidelines. We drafted a platform: fair and transparent rule enforcement, reasonable restrictions focused on actual safety and property values rather than personal preferences, and a formal appeals process for any complaints. Then we recruited candidates. Tom agreed to run for president. Jennifer would run for vice president. A retired teacher named Margaret Sullivan, who had lived in Riverside Meadows for 15 years and was widely respected, agreed to run for secretary. For treasurer, we brought in David Park, an accountant who had moved in 2 years ago and had actually found some questionable financial practices in the HOA's budget reports. When we filed our candidacy paperwork in September, Karen tried to block it on technicalities. She claimed some of the paperwork was filed incorrectly, that some candidates did not meet residency requirements, and that we had not followed proper procedure. But we had done our homework. Everything was filed correctly and on time. Marcus reviewed every document before we submitted it. There was nothing she could legally do to stop the election. The campaign got nasty. Karen and her remaining board allies sent out mailers calling our group anti-community activists who wanted to turn Riverside Meadows into a lawless slum. They claimed we would eliminate all rules and tank property values. We responded with facts. We distributed the actual platform, testimonials from families who had been unfairly targeted, and a side-by-side comparison of HOA dues versus actual neighborhood improvements. David had found that nearly 30% of the HOA budget was going to legal fees and administrative costs that were not clearly documented. In late September, we held a town hall meeting at the community center. Over 200 people showed up. Karen and her board tried to control the meeting, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Person after person stood up with stories of HOA overreach. The wheelchair ramp situation particularly resonated. The retired couple, the Hendersons, explained that they had tried to work with the board to find a compromise on the ramp design, but Patricia had refused to budge, claiming any ramp would set a bad precedent. "My wife has MS," Mr. Henderson said, his voice shaking with emotion. "She cannot walk upstairs anymore. We were not trying to make a political statement. We just needed her to be able to enter her own home safely." The room erupted in supportive applause. Karen tried to defend the board's position, claiming they were just following the bylaws, but she was shouted down. The election was held on the second Saturday of October. We organized carpools to help elderly residents get to the polling location. We had volunteers making phone calls and knocking on doors to encourage turnout. When the results were announced that evening, our entire slate had won by overwhelming margins. Tom got 73% of the vote for president. Jennifer, Margaret, and David all won their races with similar numbers. Karen came in last place, not even managing to keep her seat on the board. The transition was immediate. The new board was sworn in the following week. Their first action was to suspend all pending fines and complaints pending review. The second was to hire an independent attorney to review the bylaws and recommend changes. The third was to rescind the beautification project rules that had been aimed at my trampoline and others. I attended that first board meeting, held in the community center with about 60 other residents who wanted to see the new leadership in action. Tom ran the meeting efficiently and professionally. There was no grandstanding, no power trips, just practical discussion of community issues. When they got to the part about rescinding the beautification rules, Jennifer made a statement. We believe homeowners should have reasonable freedom to use their property as they see fit, as long as they are not creating genuine hazards or nuisances. A trampoline in someone's backyard is not a nuisance. A vegetable garden is not a nuisance. A wheelchair ramp is absolutely not a nuisance. The previous board lost sight of what an HOA is supposed to do: maintain common areas, handle shared expenses, and protect property values through reasonable, fairly enforced standards. The room applauded. Over the next few months, the new board made significant changes. They renegotiated the contract with the HOA management company, saving thousands of dollars. They implemented a transparent budgeting process where all expenses were posted online for residents to see. They created an appeals process for complaints so homeowners could not be fined without having a chance to respond. And they updated the bylaws to remove or modify the most unreasonable restrictions. Patricia and her family moved out in December. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that they relocated to a different subdivision in Scottsdale. I did not know if she joined that HOA board, but I felt sorry for those residents if she did. Karen stayed in Riverside Meadows but kept a low profile. I would occasionally see her at the mailboxes, and we would exchange polite nods. Nothing more. She seemed diminished somehow, like the loss of her board position had taken something vital from her. As for my trampoline, it became something of a neighborhood gathering spot. With the new board's emphasis on community, we started organizing backyard playdates where kids from different families could come over and use it. Emma and I would supervise, and other parents would bring snacks and drinks. It became a way for families to connect beyond just waving at each other while driving past. Jake made several new friends this way. Lily started a mini jumping competition with some of the neighbor girls, complete with scorecards and everything. It was exactly what I had hoped for when I installed the trampoline in the first place. A way to bring some joy and activity into my kids' lives. The legal bills from the whole mess came to about $7,000, even after the settlement from Patricia. But Marcus worked with me on a payment plan, and honestly, it was worth every penny. Not just because we won, but because it led to real change in the neighborhood. In February, the new board organized a community barbecue in the park at the center of the subdivision. It was the first neighborhood event in years that was actually well attended. There were games for kids, food trucks, and live music from a local band. I was manning the grill at one point when Tom came over with a beer in each hand, offering me one. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "For what?" "For starting this. For not just accepting the way things were. I had been frustrated with the HOA for years, but I did not think anything could change. You proved me wrong." I took the beer and clinked bottles with him. "We all did it together, true. But you started it. And you did not back down even when they tried to destroy your property and sue you. That takes guts." I looked around at the crowd. Families laughing, kids playing, neighbors actually talking to each other instead of hiding in their houses afraid of HOA complaints. This was what a community was supposed to feel like. "It is funny," I said. "All I wanted was a trampoline for my kids. And now we have got a functional HOA board that actually serves the community. Funny how things work out." Emma came over with Jake and Lily, both of them covered in face paint from one of the activity stations. "Dad, can we get a snow cone?" Lily asked. "Sure, kiddo." As I watched them run off toward the snow cone truck, I thought about everything that had happened over the past 9 months. The confrontations, the stress, the anger, the legal battles. It had been exhausting and frustrating and expensive, but it had also been worth it, because now my kids could jump on their trampoline without me worrying about fines or retaliation. Now my neighbors could install wheelchair ramps or plant vegetable gardens or put up basketball hoops without fear. Now, we had an HOA board that actually served the community instead of ruling over it. Marcus showed up to the barbecue later that afternoon with his wife and 2 kids. I introduced him around, and several people thanked him for his work on the case. "You know the funny thing," he said while we stood in line for burgers. "I have probably gotten 5 or 6 new clients from your neighborhood because of this case. People with HOA disputes who heard about what happened and want someone who will actually fight for them. So I am good for business, the best. I should pay you a referral fee. Just keep your rates reasonable and we will call it even," he laughed. "Deal." As the sun set over Riverside Meadows, turning the Arizona sky brilliant shades of orange and pink, I stood on my back patio watching the trampoline. It was empty at the moment, just a blue circle in the grass with a safety net around it. Such a simple thing. Such an ordinary piece of playground equipment, but it had become a symbol, a line in the sand, a refusal to accept unreasonable authority just because someone had a clipboard and a title. Emma came out and slipped her arm around my waist. "What are you thinking about?" "Just that I am glad we did not take it down, me too. Even with all the stress and drama, even with that. We raised our kids to stand up for what is right. We needed to model that ourselves." I kissed her forehead. "When did you get so wise?" "I married a man stubborn enough to fight an HOA over a trampoline. I had to develop wisdom just to keep up." We stood there for a while, watching the sunset, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood settling in for the evening. Somewhere down the street, kids were laughing. A dog barked. Someone was grilling something that smelled amazing. Normal sounds. Community sounds. The sounds of people living their lives without fear of petty tyrants with clipboards. The next day was Sunday, and I spent the morning doing yard work. The grass needed mowing, some of the bushes needed trimming, and I wanted to clean out the garage. Normal homeowner stuff. Around noon, while I was edging the driveway, a car pulled up. It was a family I did not recognize, a young couple with 2 small kids. The man rolled down his window. "Excuse me, sorry to bother you." "No problem. What can I do for you? We are thinking about buying a house in this neighborhood. The realtor told us there is an HOA, and honestly, that usually makes us nervous. But she also said something about new leadership and reforms." I set down the edger and walked over to their car. "Yeah, we just went through some changes. New board, new approach. Much more reasonable than it used to be." The woman leaned over from the passenger seat. "We have got 2 kids, and we want to make sure they can play outside without constant rules and restrictions. Our last neighborhood had an HOA that fined people for sidewalk chalk." I laughed. "That sounds familiar." But no, the current board is focused on actual community needs, not nitpicking every little thing. "What house are you looking at?" They gave me the address. It was a nice place 3 streets over, good backyard, quiet location. "That is a great house. The family that lives there now is really nice. They are moving for a job relocation, I think." We talked for a few more minutes. I told them about the recent changes, the new board's priorities, and what it was like living in Riverside Meadows now. I gave them Tom's email address so they could reach out with any questions. "One more thing," the man said as they were about to drive off. "The realtor mentioned something about a trampoline dispute. She was kind of vague about it, but she said it was important for understanding the neighborhood dynamics." I gave them the short version of the story. Their eyes got wider as I explained. "Wow, the woman said when I finished. So you actually changed the entire HOA board because they tried to fine you for a trampoline. It was not just me. It was a lot of families who were tired of unreasonable restrictions. The trampoline was just the catalyst. That is actually really encouraging, the man said. It means if there are problems, the community is willing to address them rather than just accepting the status quo. Exactly. They thanked me and drove off. I went back to my edging, but I felt good. The fact that the story of what we had accomplished was becoming part of the neighborhood's reputation, something that attracted people who valued reasonable governance and community involvement, that felt like the ultimate validation. Monday morning, I was back at work. I ran a small IT consulting business from a home office, which was one of the reasons I had chosen Riverside Meadows in the first place. Good internet, quiet neighborhood, space for a dedicated office. I was on a video call with a client when my email pinged with a message from Tom. The subject line said, "Board meeting tonight's special guest." I opened it. Apparently, someone from the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOA regulations, wanted to attend our next board meeting to discuss our reforms and possibly use Riverside Meadows as a case study for other communities struggling with HOA issues. That evening, about 40 residents showed up to the meeting, much higher attendance than usual. The state representative, a woman named Deanna Foster, gave a presentation about common HOA problems and best practices for governance. "What you have accomplished here," she said, gesturing around the room, "is actually quite remarkable. Most communities that have disputes with their HOA boards never manage to organize effectively for change. They either accept the situation or they move. You organized, you followed proper procedures, and you successfully implemented reforms. That is exactly the kind of community engagement we want to encourage." She spent an hour taking questions and offering advice. When someone asked about dealing with board members who abuse their authority, she did not hold back. Document everything. Video, emails, witnesses, whatever you can get. HOA board members are not above the law. If they are selectively enforcing rules, that is illegal. If they are retaliating against residents who complain, that is illegal. If they are misusing HOA funds, that is definitely illegal. But you need evidence. After the meeting, several people came up to me. "I just want to say thank you," an older woman named Dorothy said. "I have lived here for 8 years, and I have never felt like I could actually use my own backyard without worrying about complaints. Now, I can actually enjoy my home." Others echoed similar sentiments. It was strange being treated like some kind of neighborhood hero just for refusing to take down a trampoline, but I understood what they really meant. It was not about the trampoline. It was about standing up to bullies. As winter turned to spring, life in Riverside Meadows continued to improve. The new board used part of the budget surplus, created by cutting unnecessary legal expenses and renegotiating contracts, to improve the community park. They added new playground equipment, repaired the tennis courts, and installed better lighting on the walking paths. They also started a monthly newsletter featuring upcoming events, budget updates, and profiles of longtime residents. It was corny, but it worked. People felt more connected to the neighborhood. Jake's 10th birthday party in April was the biggest social event our family had hosted since moving to Arizona. We set up the trampoline as the main attraction, along with a bounce house rental, a taco bar, and a piñata. Half of Jake's class showed up, plus kids from the neighborhood. I was flipping burgers on the grill when I noticed something that made me smile. Several of the kids jumping on the trampoline were ones I recognized from the security footage, kids who had been using it without permission when Patricia was trying to get me to take it down. The difference was, now they were invited guests. Now their parents were standing in my backyard chatting with Emma and me, drinking lemonade and eating tacos. Now it was actually a community gathering instead of trespassing that I had to worry about documenting for legal purposes. One of those parents, a woman named Sarah whose son Cody was in Jake's class, came over to thank me. "I just wanted to apologize," she said. "I know Cody and some other kids were using your trampoline without permission last year. I did not even know about it until all the HOA drama came out. I am really sorry. It is okay. They are kids. They saw a trampoline and wanted to jump, I get it. Still, we should have asked, and we definitely should not have let Patricia manipulate us into thinking it was somehow our right to use your stuff just because it was in the neighborhood. You were not the problem. Patricia was, and that is all resolved now. You know she tried to join the HOA board in her new neighborhood. Really? Yeah, my friend lives in the same subdivision in Scottsdale. Patricia lasted exactly one board meeting before the other members basically told her to back off. Apparently, she tried to implement a bunch of new rules immediately, and they were not having it. She resigned a week later. I shook my head. Some people never learn. Some people just like having power over others. She was that type. The party was a massive success. Jake declared it his best birthday ever, and several parents asked if we could make the trampoline gathering a regular thing. Emma suggested monthly playdates, rotating which families hosted. By May, we had a solid group of about 8 families who regularly got together for weekend barbecues, playdates, and even occasional adult evenings with wine and conversation after the kids were in bed. The trampoline that had caused so much drama had become the catalyst for genuine friendships. In June, I was contacted by a local news station. Apparently, Deanna Foster from the state had mentioned our story during a seminar about HOA governance, and a reporter thought it would make a good human interest piece. I was hesitant at first. The last thing I wanted was to rehash all the drama or turn Patricia into some kind of villain for public entertainment. But Emma convinced me. "Think about how many people are dealing with nightmare HOAs right now," she said. "If our story helps even one family stand up for themselves, it is worth it." The reporter, a young guy named Chris Martinez from ABC 15, came out the following week. He interviewed me, Emma, Tom, several other neighbors, and even got Deanna Foster to provide commentary about HOA reform. The segment aired on a Friday evening in late June. It was about 5 minutes long, titled "How One Family's Fight Over a Trampoline Reformed an Entire HOA." They showed footage of the neighborhood, interviews with happy residents, and before and after comparisons of the bylaws. They also briefly mentioned Patricia without using her full name, just identifying her as the former board president who resigned amid allegations of harassment and selective rule enforcement. My phone started ringing almost immediately after the segment aired. Friends from out of state who had seen it online, neighbors congratulating us, and surprisingly, several people from other Arizona communities asking for advice on their own HOA problems. I spent most of Saturday on the phone, telling the story over and over, offering what advice I could. Marcus called me laughing, saying his office had been flooded with calls from HOA disputes. "I am seriously going to have to hire another associate just to handle the caseload," he said. "You are the gift that keeps on giving." The story got picked up by a few national outlets online. Nothing huge, but enough that I started getting emails and social media messages from around the country. Most were supportive, people sharing their own HOA horror stories and thanking me for standing up. A few were negative, mostly from people who believed HOAs were necessary to prevent neighborhoods from becoming messy and property values from tanking. I tried to engage respectfully with those critics, explaining that I was not anti-HOA, just anti-abuse. One email stood out. It was from a lawyer in Florida who specialized in HOA law. "Your case is being used in my practice as an example of proper procedure for disputing HOA overreach," he wrote. "The way you documented everything, followed proper channels, organized community support, and ultimately used the democratic process to create change is a textbook example of how these things should be handled. Well done." That email got printed and went on my office wall. By July, things had mostly returned to normal. The media attention faded, the phone calls slowed down, and life in Riverside Meadows continued peacefully. The trampoline was still getting daily use. The HOA board was still functioning well. Property values in the neighborhood had actually increased slightly, probably because the reputation of having a reasonable HOA made it more attractive to buyers. I ran into Karen once at the grocery store. She was in the produce section, examining tomatoes. I thought about just walking past, but something made me stop. "Hey, Karen," she looked up surprised. "Warren, hello. How are you doing?" "Fine. You?" "Good. Kids are out of school for summer, keeping busy." We stood there for an awkward moment. Then she said, "I saw the news story." "Yeah, that was unexpected. You made us look pretty bad." I just told the truth. The reporter asked questions and I answered honestly. She set down the tomato she had been holding. "You know, I did not join the HOA board to be a villain. I actually thought I was helping the neighborhood." "I believe you, but somewhere along the way it stopped being about helping and started being about control." "Maybe." She picked up another tomato. "Patricia was the worst of us. She really was, but I enabled her. I went along with things I knew were wrong because it was easier than confronting her." I did not know what to say to that. "Anyway," Karen continued, "I am glad things worked out. The new board is doing a good job, better than we did. It is never too late to be part of positive change. I am sure Tom would welcome your input if you have ideas." "Maybe, we will see." She put the tomato in her basket. "Take care, Warren. You too." As I walked away, I felt a strange sense of closure. Karen was not a bad person. She had just gotten caught up in a toxic dynamic with Patricia. Maybe she would find a way to contribute positively to the community again someday. August brought one final twist to the story. I received a certified letter from Patricia's attorney. My stomach dropped when I saw it, worried it was another lawsuit or some kind of retaliation. Instead, it was a settlement offer for the countersuit she had filed for defamation, the one that had never gone anywhere after our initial case settled. My client wishes to withdraw her counterclaim with prejudice and offers $2,500 in recognition of attorney fees you incurred defending against this claim. I called Marcus immediately. "Is this real?" "It is real." Her attorney probably told her that pursuing the countersuit was a lost cause and that she risked owing even more if she lost. This is her cutting her losses. Should I take it? Absolutely. It is free money at this point, and it officially closes out all legal issues between you two. I took the settlement. When the check arrived, Emma and I decided to use it to fund the neighborhood playdate group, buying supplies and equipment that could be rotated between families. We also donated some to the community center for their after-school program. It felt right, turning something that had started with Patricia's spite into something that benefited the community. September came, and with it, the start of a new school year. Jake was going into 5th grade, Lily into 3rd. They both had friends in the neighborhood now, kids they could walk to school with or ride bikes with on weekends. The trampoline was showing some wear after a year and a half of heavy use, but it was still in good shape. I replaced a few springs and patched one small tear in the net, normal maintenance. One Saturday afternoon, I was outside reading while the kids jumped. My phone rang with a number I did not recognize. "Hello, is this Warren Davis?" "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Robert Chen. I am a producer for a podcast called HOA Nightmares. We tell stories about HOA disputes and discuss property rights issues. I would love to have you on as a guest to tell your story." I almost said no. We had already done the news segment, and I did not want to become the guy who just talked about his trampoline dispute forever. But then he said something that changed my mind. "We have been contacted by several listeners who said your news story inspired them to stand up to their own HOA boards. One family in Texas successfully fought a similar selective enforcement case. Another in Nevada organized a recall election. I think your story could help even more people if we could do a deep dive into the details, the strategy you used, the legal framework, all of that. Let me think about it." I talked it over with Emma that evening. "It is your decision," she said, "but I think if it helps people, it is worth doing. Just make sure you are comfortable with it." I called Robert back the next day and agreed. We recorded the podcast episode the following week. A 2-hour conversation about everything that had happened, the legal strategies, the community organizing, the media attention, all of it. The episode aired in October, almost exactly a year after the board election that had changed everything. It was downloaded over 50,000 times in the first week. I received hundreds of messages from listeners. People thanking me, people sharing their stories, people asking for specific advice. I tried to respond to as many as I could, always with the same basic message. Document everything, know your rights, organize your community, and do not be afraid to fight back against unreasonable authority. Some of those messages were heartbreaking. Families being fined thousands of dollars for minor violations, elderly people on fixed incomes facing liens on their homes, disabled residents being denied reasonable accommodations. The HOA system, when abused, could destroy lives, but there were also success stories. People who had listened to the podcast or seen the news story and used similar strategies to create change in their own neighborhoods. Those messages made everything worth it. By the time Thanksgiving rolled around, I felt like I could finally put the whole saga behind me. We had won. The neighborhood was better. Other families had been helped. The trampoline was still standing in my backyard, and my kids were still using it every day. We hosted Thanksgiving at our house, inviting both our families and several neighbors. It was a huge gathering, almost 30 people, and we had to set up tables in the backyard because we could not fit everyone inside. Tom gave a toast before dinner. I want to thank Warren and Emma for hosting today, and for a lot more than that. A year ago, this neighborhood was a different place. People were afraid to use their own yards, afraid to make simple changes to their homes, afraid of petty tyrants with clipboards. Warren refused to accept that. He fought back, and in doing so, he inspired all of us to fight back. Now we have a community instead of a dictatorship. So thank you, Warren. Thank you, Emma. And thank you to everyone here who stood up and made change possible. Everyone clinked glasses and cheered. I felt Emma squeeze my hand under the table. After dinner, the kids all went outside to jump on the trampoline while the adults sat around talking. I watched them through the window. A dozen children bouncing and laughing, completely oblivious to the drama that piece of equipment had caused. Marcus came over with a beer. "You know, in all my years practicing law, I have never had a case with such a perfect ending. The bad guys lost. The good guys won, and there was actual systemic change. Usually, these things just fizzle out with nobody really happy. We got lucky. You made your own luck. You documented everything, you followed proper procedure, and you never backed down. That is not luck. That is strategy and determination. I just wanted my kids to have a trampoline, he laughed. And now they have a trampoline, you have got a reformed HOA, and you are some kind of folk hero to people fighting bad HOAs all over the country. Not bad for a guy who just wanted his kids to have a place to jump. As the evening wound down and people started heading home, I found myself back outside on the patio, looking at the trampoline. It was dark now, but the motion sensor lights illuminated it enough to see. Such a simple thing. 15 feet of blue fabric and springs. But it had become so much more than that. It had become a symbol of standing up for what was right, a catalyst for community change, a reminder that ordinary people could fight back against petty tyranny and win. Emma came out and wrapped her arms around me from behind. What are you thinking about? That I am glad we did not take it down. Me too, even with everything that happened. Especially because of everything that happened. We made things better, not just for us but for everyone. You know what I am most proud of, she said. What? Our kids got to see their parents stand up for what was right, even when it was hard and expensive and stressful. That is a better lesson than anything we could teach them with words. She was right. Jake and Lily had watched the entire saga unfold. They had seen us get threatened, seen us fight back, seen us organize the community and create change. They had learned that standing up to bullies was possible and necessary. We stood there for a while, holding each other, watching the trampoline in the dim light. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The night was cool, perfect Arizona winter weather. Come on, Emma said eventually. Let us go inside, it is getting cold. In a minute. I wanted to stand there just a little longer, soaking in the peace of that moment. The fight was over. The reforms were in place. The community was thriving. And my kids' trampoline, the thing that had started it all, stood exactly where it belonged, in my backyard, ready for another day of jumping and laughter. Tomorrow, Jake and Lily would wake up and probably spend an hour bouncing around before school. Their friends might come over after school to join them. This weekend, we would host another playdate with burgers and lemonade and neighbors who had become genuine friends, all because I had refused to take down a trampoline. All because sometimes, standing up to unreasonable authority, even when it seems easier to just give in, is the right thing to do. I took one last look at the trampoline, then followed Emma inside. The story was over, but the life we had fought for was just beginning. And that made everything, all the stress and drama and expense, completely worth it.